The Russian withdrawal from Kherson has begun. That's at least according to the ISW. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is October 22nd, 2022. This is your daily Ukraine update, and we are going to be breaking down just how the Russians might be trying to get out of Kherson without totally collapsing their forces. Let's get into it. Okay, so first off, the source reporting that the Russians have begun withdrawing is Institute for the Study of War. They said yesterday that the Russian withdrawal from Western Kherson Oblast has begun. That's pretty decisive, and they've been pretty good so far in the war. So even though it hasn't hit the main news wires, it still is going. I'm still going to believe that this is probably accurate reporting. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command said that Russian forces are, quote, quite actively transferring ammunition, military equipment, and some units from the Dnipro River's west bank to the east bank via ferries. As you guys know, the bridges have been out over the Dnipro River for some time now, and the militaries there have been relying on ferries. And we can see that obviously the ferrying process is slow going. It is not like a bridge, right? A bridge can move traffic just so much faster. 10, 100 times more traffic can pass through bridges than when you have to load it to a ferry and pass it back and forth, right? Ukrainians are also reporting that Southern Russian forces have deployed 2,000 newly mobilized men to hold the front lines, and they're continuing to shell Ukrainian positions to cover their withdrawal. This is a problem, and when we look at the front lines, I'll show you what I mean. So let's say, for example, that indeed the bridges are out. Where is our Russian forces are going to have to be able to have an orderly withdrawal all along this line. Now, chances are, in order to have an orderly withdrawal, they're going to have to collapse two key crossing points, right? Slowly, systematically working their way back in the fight, yielding territory to Ukrainian forces while staying engaged, right? Because Ukrainian forces, of course, are going to want to try to punch through this line and not allow the Russians to preserve all of their equipment and people, right? They're going to want to have the Ukrainian forces want a result like they had in Kharkiv, right? In Kharkiv, you might remember, they launched an attack that was so decisive that they captured large tranches of Russian equipment. They were in what we thought were supply depots, repair areas. They seized just a tremendous amount of Russian war material. And now that war material is probably being transferred. It's probably being used against them in Kherson. The Russians want to avoid that happening, and so they're going to be systematically trying to withdraw their stuff and then their forces. But it's hard. The forces here are going to have to keep the fight up, as the Institute for the Study of War points out, that a detachment that has to keep the fight alive, even as they withdraw, break positions, and go backwards, has to be well-trained, professional, and committed. Now, is that going to be those 2,000 recently mobilized troops? Almost certainly not. It's going to have to be top-tier Russian combat units because, again, recently mobilized troops can sit in a trench and point weapon toward enemy, but anything more complex than that, you really need to have actual soldiers doing it. And a withdrawal like this is going to be something that definitely needs to be done by the professionals. So where are they going to withdraw to? Well, as we've discussed, we know that there is a dam right here that remains intact that the Russians have rigged to explode. I actually suspect that this will be their crossing point, and that by rigging it to explode, they are creating a sort of almost like a dead man switch, where they know that Ukrainian forces will not destroy this bridge, meaning that there's a 100% chance that Russian forces will be able to use it to cross to the last man. And they know that Ukrainian forces would never risk destroying this dam, and because it's laden with explosives, even an single errant shell could do so. And so I suspect that this will be their final crossing point. Now, as you guys can see, there's also some intact roadways that are leading from Kherson to this bridge, pretty significant ones. So what's probably going to be happening is they're probably going to ferry across as much men and material as they can, but the final withdrawal will probably involve yielding Kherson first, right? Collapsing from the west to the east on to this on to this dam, right? This front line will probably remain intact for as long as possible. The reason is, of course, Russian forces have had a lot more time to dig in and establish these fighting positions. So why yield them now? Instead, you're going to want to see them withdraw from Kherson, right? When Ukrainian forces retake the city, that's also going to take a long time, right? Even if there's not really any resistance in the city, Russian forces will almost certainly force the Ukrainian military to clear buildings, disarm mines and traps, and it's just going to be a time-consuming process. Meanwhile, of course, Russian forces, as many as they can, are probably going to try to dig in along the Dnipro. But those forces fighting in Kherson are going to have their work cut out for them as they have to pull inward towards this final dam and then complete the withdrawal. Right now, I suspect it's in the early stages, right? They're probably moving things like supply depots, ammunition depots, repair areas, hospitals, caches. They're moving all of that to the backfield here. That means, of course, that the troops remaining on the front line are going to be more vulnerable, right? Their supply lines are going to be stretched longer. They are just going to have a harder time of everything. And that's why, again, this is such a delicate operation that requires such well-trained troops, not just combat troops, but even logistics troops. You need really good staff officers to plan a logistics train that's going to keep those troops in the fight with supplies, even as those supply lines get strung out further and further. Are the recently mobilized conscripts up to it? Are the remaining Russian combat troops in Kherson up to this sort of task? It sort of remains to be seen, especially as we've talked about. I suspect that many of Ukraine's best troops are being moved from Kharkiv to supplement the forces in Kherson. And I don't know. I'll be very curious to see how this all plays out. Again, great to see, of course, Ukraine liberating Kherson, the Russians simply giving up. And this is one of the things that I did want to at least acknowledge, that when we talk about things like logistics, preparing the battlefield, taking out all those bridges, all of those things, look, well, yes, there was definitely an offensive victory in retaking this territory here. You can see that the Russians are just sort of giving up Kherson without a decisive battle. And what a tremendous victory to score, right? To liberate your territory and not have to engage in major decisive operations. This is just a testament to good logistics and good combat pressure, right? This is what happens when, again, you narrow those arteries that allow supplies to pass to those forces, so that eventually, over time, just like we talked about, the ability to keep these troops supplied becomes so difficult, so impossible, that without a single decisive battle, Russian forces have simply declared themselves the losers of Kherson and are preparing to withdraw. Like we talked about, just a testament to Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian command, really, their discipline, their willingness to play a long game and understand in a way that the Russian weakness here in this conflict has been their logistics train, their ability to train, equip, and outfit their troops. That's been probably their greatest weakness, and it's Ukraine's greatest advantage. And frankly, they are exploiting it in spades. All right, that is all I had for you guys for today. As always, if you want to see the uncensored combat videos, the kind that YouTube has cracked down on and won't let me show you, I do the breakdowns for all those things on the Patreon. Thank you so much to my Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys make this entire thing possible, and I will see you all in the next one.